everybody. This is a Thursday evening in Europe and morning in the North America, which means it's time for a new Fullfunnel Live episode. Today, we are so excited to host it with one of the best ABM teams we have ever worked with, and we have Divash and Lee from Cardata. Divash is VP of Marketing and Lee is Product Marketing Manager. And as promised, guys, we are going to talk about launch and a pilot ABM program. All the questions that you all asked us about and interested in how to get buy-in from sales and stakeholders to launch the pilot program, how to orchestrate the program and set up the right KPIs, how to balance marketing and sales resources between ABM and other motions, and basically the review of the team stack, right? And the results of the program. That being said, let us know, guys, where you're joining us from in the chat. And you guys, you are tuning in from Canada, right?
That's correct. Toronto.
Some family there. We are calling in from Valencia in Spain and Villarreal, right, Andre?
Yeah. And while guys typing in the chat, let's do a quick intro. I think it's important to introduce, first of all, Cardata, right? What this product is all about and who is your target audience to give a better context how our entire ABM program was orchestrated. So guys, pass and mic to you.
Sure.
Go for it.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Divash. I'll just do a quick introduction to the business, who we are, what we sell, who we sell to. So in short, Cardata is the fully managed vehicle reimbursement software partner. So we pair easy to use mileage capture technology with a suite of reporting and support services that enable employees to use their personal cars to drive for work. And in doing so, get paid fairly and tax-free. So we typically replace traditionally outdated methods of driving for work, such as taxable car allowances and expensive company cars, for example. And we're able to do this by leveraging IRS regulations and our robust database of local cost information to design and then go on to effectively manage these custom tax compliant reimbursement programs, typically saving companies, particularly in the US, around 30%. So as of today, we processed over 1 billion miles and we've reimbursed over $900 million in mileage reimbursements. So very interesting. I will say, as for our target market, we are one of the few SaaS organizations that doesn't actually sell to other SaaS organizations, which is very rare these days, especially as we are very active on LinkedIn and we kind of see these businesses grow in the AI space that are targeting other software organizations. So our buyers don't really buy the same. Our business model and target audience is rooted in in-person work. So mobility and field teams, particularly in non-specialty or rigged vehicles that could be personal cars or replaced with a employee-owned model. So that means our target audience represents a group of really core industries that have field teams frequently on the road for work. So field service, field sales, respectively. So just some other context, Cardata was founded by ex-fleet management professionals back in 1999. So we've been serving mid-market to Fortune 500 enterprises for around 25 years, typically in the US, as I mentioned, the IRS. So that's our core market, but with a couple really great partnerships in Canada too. That's a little bit of a rundown.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the intro. I think it's really important to give this context because giving a story or advice without context is really difficult for people to then translate it and know what's applicable and what not. So I think basically targeting Fortune 500 upper mid-market companies that are not SaaS, that are not hanging out all day, let's say online on the internet, on social media and Slack groups. I think this is an interesting context to talk about. So given that context and what you did, and we know we are going to talk about this pilot program, just wanted to kind of go back to a quote that I heard Andre mention several times that you mentioned at the beginning when he was speaking to you the first time. And he was mentioning that you said that we are aligned with sales on paper, but we don't really do a lot of things together. And a lot of companies kind of stop there on that, as I sometimes call it, PowerPoint alignment or paper-based alignment, right? So what motivated you to go and do the difficult thing and break the silos and launch that ABM program together?
Yeah, I can take that first, and then Lee add anything else there. I say that all the time. I continue to say that sometimes even today, so that because a partnership is good, getting better, but it's not where we still want it to be, right? There's still room for improvement, and we've already made so much progress. So yeah, I mean, the term sales and marketing alignment we hear this all the time, and I don't think sales and marketing leaders go out of their way to actually not align, right? Have you ever heard someone say, "Oh, I want to work in a silo. I don't want sales and marketing alignment"? Nobody says that, but everyone says we want to do it. So that's the same thing it was happening to us. But it's I think it's fair to understand. Just indulge me for like 5 minutes. Is that you have to understand where the misalignment comes from, right? It's not because the leaders don't want to do it, but it's the structure that actually forces sales and marketing into silos. So 3 quick things. One is incentive structure, right? And short-term versus medium/long-term focus. A sales team is incentivized to hit meetings targets today, to hit revenue targets today and this quarter, which, by the way, it should be that way, because if that wasn't the case, we would never have any revenue. And then everyone who's worked for marketing knows that nothing really works today or even next week or even this quarter. Whatever you're doing it for 2-3 months down the line or next quarter, right? So there's this inherent sort of tension between short-term and medium-term focus. Second, I think, is data. To add to that and to add to those incentives, different team looks at different sections of the go-to-market data. Nobody's looking at the entire funnel and saying what is the top of funnel, like content syndication, MQLs from marketing, and BDR meetings, and what is it converting at, and then what actually is working, right? Because of the incentives, you'll often 2 examples that you'll find BDR team is only looking at meetings because that's what they're incentivized to do without looking at close one. And then marketing teams, we don't do that, but many marketing teams only look at MQLs and hand it over to sales and actually never look at what actually converted. So you can have a situation where the meetings book target is being hit, the MQL target is being hit, and you have BDRs and marketing teams celebrating, and then you have the sales team saying, "What's going on, guys? Like, there's no revenue," and so quality of leads doesn't happen. So this can be solved if you look at go-to-market data as a whole, right? And so that's where the misalignment comes from. And third piece is high-level strategy. Like, are we aligned on what problems to solve? Does sales and marketing align on and agree on the same problems, right? Because if sales team thinks that our problem is something else, and the marketing team thinks it's broad awareness, then the solutions will be completely different, and that forces everybody into the silos as well, right? So these are sort of the 3 things I think force people and teams into silos. And what this leads to is that it leads to a lot of inefficiencies, right? And especially in today's world where efficient growth is everything, basically, right? I mean, even VC-backed companies with a lot of money, companies who are raised, want efficient growth. And so the sort of the impetus for me to do this is for us to pursue this was to actually get sustainable and efficient growth. Sustainable meaning, last one on this is sustainable meaning, you're thinking of pipeline, and we talk about this all the time. We're focusing on pipeline today, but also focusing on future pipeline, right? So that you always sort of nurturing a pipeline. And efficient obviously means your CAC payback period, right? So how efficiently, for every dollar spent in sales and marketing, how many dollars are you getting back in revenue? That's really important. And the more you break the silos, the better that ratio is. Hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would love to ask you, and there were actually around 7 questions that were formulated in different ways, but they were all about the same. So how did you actually get a buy-in from stakeholders and from sales in a such short period of time? And how did you set up the right expectations for the program? I think this is one of the biggest challenges for the marketing teams.
Yeah. Quick 30 seconds, and then I'll hand over to Lee. So the first thing is some context is that, I was the first go-to-market hire at Cardata, right? So I actually built the initial BDR team, the revenue ops team, and the marketing team, which I still lead today. So I have some context and historical data where I can provide additional information. One, and then second is basically solving those three problems that I mentioned, right? So making sure that we align the same problem, making sure we're looking at the same data, and then after that, which is sort of Lee's leading that, is coming up with a clear process of like, this is what the process is, this is what the leading and lagging and leading indicators are, this is what success looks like. And the last thing we did was, there's always this talk about commissions and on target earnings. One thing we did was I said, don't worry, the BDR assigned to us, since they are helping us build the initial pilot project, we will guarantee the OTE for the first 3 months. So that takes the pressure off the BDR and the BDR manager to sort of field questions, and also the BDR can actually focus on process and go through it, rather than again going to a short-term mentality of booking the meeting today, right? And this is the only situation where if the BDR connects with somebody and thinks they're not ready for a meeting, they can actually punt that meeting to a later date, because they know that they're not in the buying cycle, as opposed to with the early incentive that, okay, book a meeting today because that's what my target says. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think Divash covered it really well. I think being able to collaborate and say, okay, we're going to give this a shot. Like we're going to take a deep breath and actually take a minute and step back and like try something wholeheartedly was something that we had to get like the full team to commit to. And I think exactly as Divash mentioned, like guaranteeing certain things, and also, asking for like a very, a finite amount of resources, saying we need one person for this amount of time. We're going to achieve these things. Let us try it. I think that was really helpful by being able to say, look, like this is what we're trying to accomplish. This is what we're going to accomplish. If you give us this, we'll be able to get that for you. And I think that it was successful in being able to collaborate and saying, okay, let's compromise. We'll get there, because at the end of the day, as Divash mentioned, we're all shooting for the same goal now, which is so much more helpful in getting everybody to get excited and ready to pursue an approach like this.
So you made the ask smaller. You focused on a very finite, scoped down pilot project. Can you tell us what were kind of the main pillars of that pilot program that you launched, I think 2.5 months ago or so?
Yeah, I'll take you through a little bit of the high level logistics, and I'll take you kind of through like what we were able to achieve, through doing this, or what were our guiding focuses or principles, so to speak. But the way we were able to get really successful buy-in and actually see quite a lot of success from our pilot alone was simplifying it by creating a small group of target accounts, really focused on a specific cluster and a specific problem. And when we were able to segment it down like that, we could really get the group focused on targeting high value, high revenue potential group of accounts that we had really good account information and research about. When we're able to segment it down smaller, instead of looking at this as like a grandeur revenue strategy, which it will become for us, and it is going to be, when we segmented it down to be a pilot and a project, it was easier to be digestible by everybody. And when we were able to kind of break down what the roles look like in a format that made sense and that connected to everybody's roles in a way that they were comfortable with, but also expanded a little bit for more cross-functional collaboration, it was also something exciting for people to get to do that they wouldn't typically do. So for example, we had a content team member on our team, and we had a BDR on our team and an MDR, right? So everybody has their roles, and they have things that they would typically do, like our BDR on the phone, emailing, right? But the difference now is there's more content collaboration. They're talking to the content team, they're writing, right? So it's exciting for them to get to expand a little bit. And when we kept it within the sphere of one particular problem cluster and one thing we were trying to solve for our group of accounts, it was a lot easier to start, a lot easier to get everybody's minds wrapped around it. In terms of like, what the pillars that guided us were in terms of how we knew we were going to achieve our goals, I would say communication and effective collaboration between teams is probably the most important thing of any campaign that I've seen, especially our pilot, is having effective meetings every week where you're coming together and you're actually talking about what's going on, you're talking about what's needed, having open dialogue and a really solid, comfortable team that trusts each other to move forward through the pilot is so important. Leveraging data also, we actually had a really great collaborative session where we, sat together and talked about everything and talked about data and talked about what we've seen, talked about our customers, talked about the customers we want. And that gave us a lot of trust in each other and insights into different points of view of different groups, right? Because we obviously know marketing speaks differently than sales, right? We speak differently to the audience than sales does. So that was really helpful. The other kind of pillars, I think, was effective customization, which we all know is really core to ABM. It's like how to effectively personalize on a scale that makes sense. And so looking at the target kind of campaign group that we did, we were able to really break down what level of personalization makes the most sense for these clients. Where are the intersections between their issues or their problems or their pain points? Where are areas that we need to segment it down even further? And then really supporting that by like building the blueprint to repeat it again, to help our BDRs, for example, execute that process. And then I think the final element, besides the integration between all the mediums that we use to target accounts, is just like commitment from everybody. That was a really important element for us, is commitment to results, commitment to outreach KPIs, commitment to all the KPIs that we had set for the program, and then allowing the team to feel supported by each other, that we can all achieve that. And then by, ultimately having a structure for everyday work that supported the achievement. I think everybody was really trusted in their KPIs, trusted that if we hit them, we would get there. And then ultimately grace to let the campaign run for 2+ months. It's not a short-term campaign. It's long-term. People want short-term results. That's not how it works. So getting the grace to run it for a little bit longer, that commitment really allowed us to achieve the results of our program.
I think it's important to highlight, I wanted to say, I think it's important to highlight Divash's mission. He was extremely well onboarding everybody on how long does it realistically take to generate sales opportunity and how many touch points you need to have across multiple channels, considering the fact that the audience is not hanging out on LinkedIn all the day long, right? So it's not marketers selling marketing software to other marketers, right? Completely different environments. So non-active social buyers, then enterprise organizations where it's extremely hard even to define the right buyer persona to target, right? We can define all these roles, VP of something, chief something officer, right? But it's completely different when you open Sales Navigator or Zoom Info and try to find a concrete persona you need to engage with, concrete persona who is in charge of the challenge or jobs to be done your product solves with, right? So I think that was brilliant, and I wanted to highlight that this was one of the most important pillars to kind of keep the motivation. And also, just to quickly summarize, for everybody, I think what was really, really important is that you got a committed team and you had a clear blueprint and frameworks with KPIs, timeline, actions, right? Actions to how we are going to create awareness among target accounts, how we're going to engage and have conversations with them, right? How can we nurture accounts that are not sales ready, and how can we book meetings with those that are sales ready? How can we create personalized offers? I think one of the biggest mistakes, and correct me if I'm wrong, when it comes to buy-in, just wanted to wrap up that topic before we'll move to specific details of your program, is that when marketing team comes to sales and to stakeholders and says, hey, I want to break silos, I want to do ABM. Okay, but what are you going to do? Well, we'll run some ads, we'll do some outreach, and we hope it will work. Okay, but can you show specific responsibilities for, like you were mentioning, so we had multiple roles involved. Who will be in charge of what exactly? What's time involvement, right? What are the KPIs for these people? And then usually an awkward pause happens, right? So, and then there is no buy-in. So Before we'll proceed, let me guys quickly introduce our sponsor, our long-term partner company called Dealfront. Dealfront is one of the leading European intent data providers, and also they kind of developed an ABM functionality on their platform. So now they also provide social signals and account enrichment with great integrations to HubSpot and Salesforce. So you can build, and especially if you're selling in EMEA markets, that could be a fantastic solution. They have one of the biggest databases of the contacts, and they're GDPR compliant. What we love about Dealfront is that this is a product-led growth company, so you can just sign up for a free trial and evaluate if the product is a great fit for you. We are dropping the link in the chat so you guys can sign up and evaluate the product for yourself. Coming back to our program, what we would love to talk about next are kind of the results. I know that it's just, like you mentioned, it was the pilot program, which is supposed to be a long-term strategy, right? But still, what results can we mention as, let's say, positive outcomes of that pilot program? Next, what was your ABM team structure? So who we had, what roles, right? What were the KPIs or main responsibilities? What stack do you have? So, and maybe more or less, let's say, general overview of the activities that you have done. Okay, so let's start maybe with the results of that program.
Divash, would you like me to take this one?
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Okay, great. So yeah, we'll ultimately we're very happy and excited about the results of our program. I will say that we have achieved a lot more traction than our siloed programs, particularly on the high value opportunities front. So like when banding together, when collaborating on messaging and targeting and everything in between, we've been able to generate quite a good quantity of really solid active opportunities. And not only that, but like really understanding what the timeline looks like on our future opportunities. So I think that in and of itself is a big win, is understanding, okay, we've got our current pipeline rolling, it's good, it's nurtured, but then also we have this longer term future pipeline that we're building that we understand. We know what's important to them. We know their buying structure, right? So that's been really, really great. Besides, revenue potential, the other really great result of our pilot is that we're gonna do more of these. Like we already have 2 on deck. So the next 2 kind of ABM target groups have been created. We have more resources, right? We've gotten actually another BDR from the sales team. So now we're expanding. So we're actually going to be pursuing this approach at least for another 2 full cycles minimum. I think, Divash and I see this as like a long-term approach, but I'll let Divash speak his perspective too, because I think this is something that it's impossible not to do at this point, right? We've got to keep doing it.
Yeah. And just to take this point back to Andre, what he said about, I was very clear with everybody on so the timeline it's going to take. For marketers out there, I think, everybody's, even if I say like 2 months and everyone agrees on 2 months, on about week 6, people will start asking, okay, is it working? Is it working? It's not working. Nothing's happening. Like I think every marketer has faced this at some point. And that's when it gets really tough, because you're following the process. You also know that these things takes time, right? Because building awareness with accounts takes time. And we know that towards the end, if there is a meeting to be had, or if they're in the buying cycle, they will consider us, right? That's the whole thinking. But just because we agreed 8 weeks back or 6 weeks back on a timeline does not mean that questions aren't asked, right? So and this is something that I obviously directly deal with, sort of the board, who's obviously very supportive of this, the leadership team, and I don't share all the details with the team because it's it shouldn't distract from the goal. But there's always, it's not like here's 8 weeks and I'll check back in the week 9. No, there's always questions along the way. Just to give some practical advice of how it is. You just have to stay the course, and you got to keep reiterating, hey, we're in the process. This is going to work. Obviously, you're not Oracle. You can't predict the future, but based on everything we've done and based on the process, this should work. And then it works, some things start happening. You get engagement back from the market, and then everyone's okay. Everyone's a bit calm, and then you start getting deals, and everyone's okay. How can we expand this, right? And so that's sort of the behind the scenes things that happen, because 8 weeks is a long time, right? For a scale up or even a late stage startups, 8 weeks is a long time. It's 2/3 of a quarter, and there's obviously goals to hit, and there's it's a high pressure environment, and somewhere along week 6 to 7, people start getting a bit fidgety, right? And so we just need to just bring them back to the focus and be like, hey, we know what we're doing. Here are some, and this is where back to the leading indicators. Leading indicators are very important, right? So if we can say that, I can't just go in and say, hey, don't worry, I've done all this activity. I've reached out to 40 people. That's great. But what are you getting back from the market? Are you getting signals back from the market, or are you just screaming in the void, right? And so if we can say, hey, we have 17 engaged accounts, we have 24 LinkedIn connections, we got a message from this person, somebody commented on a LinkedIn post. Those are things, those are early indicators that this will work. And then say that, okay, the next step, logical step is that, we'll get meetings booked and deals created.
You're talking about 2 months being a long time, but I have to tell you that you were one of the fastest teams in terms of how quickly you were able not only to launch and implement the whole pilot program, let me put it like that, but also to get the results. And what I'm hearing from you right now is not only that you got the results that you can show, but you've even got another BDR, which from my perspective just means that you got a full buy-in from the rest of the organization, which is just amazing. Now, I mean, we mentioned this a couple of times. So obviously you have a really good team. And what I thought was really good with you guys is that you had, on the one hand, a really in-depth knowledge of the customers. I mean, Lee, if I'm not mistaken, you also worked in sales before you moved to product marketing. So you're kind of like knew very intimately both what the customers are struggling with and the product itself. You also had a team that was very much focused on execution, which is like a key in a situation like this. But nevertheless, even with that team, you decided to reach out to us and partner with Fullfunnel. And I just wonder, like, why was the decision made for you to, search out an expert partner, and what you have found out as a result?
I can try to take that, Lee, because
sure.
I did part of the process. So, and then add anything else. So I have been following both of you on LinkedIn for a very long time, right? And so it's been, I would say, at least a year plus, if not more. And I have consumed basically all of your content. I would say 90 to 95% of your content, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I remember the first when I first joined, I actually did not join as the marketing lead, right? So I joined as more sales ops and rev ops. So I build those teams, build a BDR team, and then when I started building the marketing team, I started doing a lot of research. I have a business background, but I don't have 100% marketing background. So I started doing research, and your accounts were one of the first I followed, and I did the full funnel sort of end-to-end approach. That's where I got the idea from. So it's been a long time coming, and so the trigger basically is that we got to do something that is not siloed, right? That we have to bring go-to-market together. We have to be perceived by the outside world as one go-to-market motion, and not as random acts of marketing and random acts of sales, right? That happens a lot of time, and the prospect perceives us in a very scattered way. So that's been a goal of mine for a long time, but it's very hard to sort of do that initially, and so we tried a lot of things internally, just following your content, following other people's content, and so there was a time when we had to sort of just get serious about, like, okay, we got to get somebody in professional to help us out to launch this product, because it's always helpful to get a third-party perspective, look at all the stuff that we already have. So when Andrea first joined, he did an evaluation of everything that we have, like the messaging, positioning, sort of what are the programs we have, what are the pain points. And so it's good to, obviously Lee and I, mostly Lee, we look at it every day. We might have our biases and we might miss stuff. So getting somebody in there to look at that and say, okay, hey, this is what we need to do. And then taking that to the leadership team and the board, saying that, hey, it's not just us. Like these guys are saying it. I've been following them for a while. They're experts in this. Let's do this. Let's get them in, and then that's sort of the first start there.
Yeah, I would echo that fully. I think Divash has always spoke very highly about your process and what you were executing in theory and really wanted to bring it to action, to execution for us. And a lot of companies try ABM. They try it, but they don't really get it. They don't get it. They like it in theory, but they don't really understand like what it is. And so for us, we wanted to do it the right way with the people who knew how to do it the right way. And we had tried different things in the past with other people in other avenues that weren't necessarily the right way for us. And I think it's also important to note, like, what is the right way for us? The right way for every company is different. I mentioned we have different buyer types than a lot of probably the companies that you work with, a lot of the companies in the space that pursue this. We have very, very different buyers, very different companies, very different target audience. So we needed to bring, we were very focused on bringing a fresh pair of eyes in and bringing everybody from every side of the business in the same room and saying, like, what are actually the meaningful messaging points that we need to hit? Like, what are the meaningful messaging points? Because it's not going to be the same for every company. Like some organizations sell differently depending on, demographics, persona, industry. Like there's all these different things that impact messaging, and for us it's different. And so we needed to come together and really have a unified front about how we understand that, and then make sure that everything's aligned. And this gave us the opportunity to do that. Specifically working with you guys, bringing a third party in is really, really helpful for getting buy-in from everybody and knowing, okay, we've got the right people in the room, we've got the right brains in the room, let's do it. And that really worked for us.
I appreciate you guys sharing your story. And let's come back to our program. So first of all, let's nail down your team setup. So what were the roles involved and what were their responsibilities?
Yeah. Okay. I'll take this one, Divash, and if I miss anything, feel free to jump in. So it's interesting, ultimately having like a sales person. I noticed somebody put something in the chat about an AE, and I think it's really important to come back to that later. I think addressing like whether it can be an account executive, but having a salesperson involved. For us, that was a BDR. So we were able to grab and use a really great business development representative who was, hungry to do something that was meaningful, that was more long-term, get out of their traditional rhythm. Was also provided to us by the sales team. So this person would be like your core executor, the person who is doing the motion every day. That we really needed that person to be fully committed to ABM, and that's what we were able to achieve, as Divash mentioned earlier. So that person is essentially FTE on ABM. The second kind of person that was really core to this, and I'll come back to myself later as like the project management perspective, was a content team member. So depending on how your organization is structured, not everybody has a dedicated content person that can do something like this. But for our team, we have the privilege of having that. So somebody who comes from marketing, who's a subject matter expert about what we do, who knows the market, who understands what we're trying to accomplish, who understands our product enough to write eloquently and support sales individuals and the marketing team in writing unified messaging across every channel. So that was really core to us, somebody who could assist the BDR and assist in a lot of these outreach initiatives to make sure that we have all of our bases covered, paid, organic, all the works. The other element, of course, was somebody kind of fulfilling the role of an MDR, so account research, all the reporting. That's extremely important. I know we'll come back to our tech stack in a bit, but I think that's one of the most important elements to make the project easier to run, is just understanding, like, what are you tracking? Are things moving? And having somebody dedicated to reporting on that is going to be really important. And then in terms of, those are kind of like the three core individuals. Besides that, we did have other resources. So myself, as the product marketing manager, I was knees deep in messaging. So when we create our campaign and you create your cluster, the messaging has to be right. It has to be right. It needs to be correct. It needs to be hyper targeted. It has to be data driven. And so at the beginning of every campaign, like we're there, we're creating those clusters. Myself as the PMM, supported by revenue operations, by making sure that we have like the correct reporting, we have the correct accounts, we understand, all of the important factors in qualification of those accounts. That was really important. So myself, revenue operations as support. And then finally, if it's important to mention that, like, again, ABM, it's emotion, sure, but it's also like a attitude. So we actually did align a lot of what we were doing in ABM with everything else we were doing at the company. So like our events, you know what I mean? Like the things that where we were going, that was all fully aligned in our cross-functional strategy to make sure that we were targeting effectively. So our events manager and the rest of our team were all very, very involved in the ABM process. So pretty big team, 3 fully dedicated resources supported by another great group of people.
Wow, that was that is a well-staffed ABM team, I would say. You mentioned you got a BDR to join almost full time, and I think a lot of people ask this question one way or another, and I see that also in the Q&A section here, is how do you approach, well, how did you approach, and what your advice potentially would be when approaching a VP of sales or whomever you need to approach to get the buy-in, to get that person dedicated. It's not something that is easy for a sales to give up, let me put it like that. So what was your approach, and maybe if you have any piece of advice for the other people?
I can start here first and hand it over to Lee. But so, yeah, I mean, if you look at an organization, every executive or even every person has a job to do, right? So they have targets to hit, they have jobs to do, they have projects to complete. And if your project aligns with them hitting their goals, they're more likely to agree, right? And so we were able to convince, by the way, shout out to Sarah, who's our VP of sales, and absolutely amazing. And obviously without her, nothing's possible. And so I was able to, show that, with this motion, we can get this done, right? We can hit our ultimate goals, which is pipeline and revenue. It also helps, two other points here. It also helps that Sarah and I are both responsible for our top line numbers, right? So it's not a silo where, again, I mentioned in the beginning, which is very important because that's where incentives need to be aligned, is if the marketing team is just responsible for MQL and pipeline, and sales is just responsible for conversions and final sale, there is a misalignment there, right? There's misincentives. There's all kinds of misalignment happens, but in our case, we both own the number, right? And so there's really alignment from the top in that case. And so I would go to the VP of sales and we'll get to the BDR and AE point because I think there's a nuance difference here. And I think Lee will have some comments here as well. But I think there is, you go with a plan. You say, we're doing this because, again, back to the strategy. We're doing this because our problem is ABC, whatever the problem is. And then you're saying ABM can solve it, or a joint sales and marketing motion can solve it. Here's the process we're going to use to solve it. And here's what we think the leading and lagging indicators are going to be. And here's what the investment required, right? So and we have some benchmarks saying for every dollar, we would need $8 to $10 in pipeline generated. That's good pipeline by any standards. In today's world, probably even 6 is good, right? I don't know. It depends on the company. But then, so you go with that plan and if they and agree on it, right? And so obviously there's the personal side of things where you have to sort of try to convince and all of that stuff. And once you then start hitting the early leading indicators, then there's more trust and all of that stuff, right? But I think there is a difference between getting a BDR and getting an AE full time. There's a huge difference, right? And so, and this, again, every company is different. So this is just my experience, is that in most companies, AEs are very expensive, much more expensive than a BDR, right? So that's just one blocker. Second is how many AEs truly prospect. Again, this is a very hot topic, so I don't want to get into that. But do they, are they spending currently spending time prospecting, or are they being fed by inbound or other motions, right? And so all of these makes a difference. It is much harder to convince somebody to give you an AE because it's probably twice as expensive. And second, and think of what an AE's role, core job is, right? It's to convert sales. It's actually not to generate pipeline in most companies. But a BDR's job is to generate pipeline. So when we're saying, hey, let's go do this ABM flow together, it makes more sense to get a BDR because the goal is the same, which is pipeline generation, as opposed to AEs. One and yeah. So I'll stop there. Lee, any thoughts?
I agree. I fully agree. I also think it helps. I mean, from a buy-in perspective, at least, to like have concrete ideas coming in. I know I getting an AE resource is probably very hard. One thing I will say is ABM is not necessarily just about outreach. You can also really, especially for AEs, it's actually very important for long-term growth to have your AEs as subject matter experts and as people who are externally seeming like subject matter experts. So getting an AE to like buy into general, marketing initiatives like posting, you know what I mean? Like that's, I know some people it's so wild to think about, right? But like having an AE do that is a really low lift way of just creating a subject matter expertise there. But without like the general outreach regulations, which can sometimes be time consuming. I would also say it did help us that we have a team that like genuinely trusts each other. And I mean, for me, coming from sales, like I have a lot of experience in the sales realm. So I understood like what would be their challenges, like what they would go up against, what their pushback would be, what their rebuttals would be. Like we really knew what we were getting into. So any advice for people who are curious about that, I would say to have a trusted member of the sales team kind of come in and let you know, this is what you're going to be up against. Like, this is what they're going to ask for. This is what's important to them, so that you understand how to create that collaborative approach in a way that makes the most sense for your business. Because for us, that really helped. Like just understanding what the sales process was and understanding what they were going to be motivated by was helpful in getting buy-in as well.
Yeah. To answer Kate's like a question on like it, so the question is also for one-to-one ABM, right? So you want 2 target accounts. I think it's a much different. Again, this is just my opinion, but I don't think you would need a dedicated AE to run a one-to-one motion. To be honest, right? Like you could. I would, if I were you, I would start by, looking at what percentage of the time the current AEs on the team spend prospecting, and then work with the VP of sales to restructure that prospecting time into an ABM flow, as opposed to, I'm assuming it's a bunch of cold emails and cold calls, and which is also important, by the way. It's part of the ABM flow at some point. But I would, that's probably a better way to do it. And then you, from marketing side, bring in the marketing resources like a customized landing page, customized ads, whatnot, and say that, hey, we do this together, go after the same accounts. It's probably going to be a better outcome for both of us, as opposed to us doing ads in a silo and and the AE reaching out in their own silos, right? I think that would be a better approach.
And you guys both mentioned several times leading indicators and lagging indicators. And I know actually a lot of people are curious, what are the right leading indicators to track, and what would be the KPIs or, let's say, revenue goals that make sense to report on?
Yeah, I'll start for sure, and without getting too much in the weeds, because every company is going to function differently, and like your key channels are going to be a little bit different. But for us, for leading, the very first thing is, can we hit our outreach KPIs, our outreach numbers, and that's not just sales outreach. Let's be clear. It's not we're emailing people, right? It's not just sales outreach, please. Probably the most important thing to take away is like, we're not talking calling or cold calls to try to book meetings. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking connections, comments, discussions, chats, like actual genuine conversation. It's not cold email count. That is not effective use, right? That's number one. Are we even able to hit what we thought we could? The second thing is, are people interacting? Are they responding? Are they interested? Are we having conversations? Is that actually happening? Are we getting likes? Are we getting looks? Are we getting responses? Like, that's very, very important to look at. Those are leading indicators before anything, is that somebody's responding, somebody's interested, we're talking to the right people at the right time in the right spot. That's really what you want to look at. The other thing is, are we moving through the journey? Are we moving through the funnel, so to speak? Full funnel. So are we actually moving up the journey? And so you can track that effectively by understanding like your scoring and all of these lovely things. But like, are we actually moving up in awareness? Are they going to different parts of our website? Are they looking at different things? Are they showing intent signals? Like, this is a really important thing for us to track specifically on the leading front that really assists us understanding if we're going to hit our goals. And so obviously from a lagging perspective, it's going to be meetings booked, pipeline, qualified pipeline, all these really important factors to understand. Like, are we hitting the right people? Is it generating actual revenue long-term, which is obviously, as we know, long-term, 2+ months. If you can get longer, do it longer because it's going to be more effective. But from a leading perspective, the interactions that you're getting and the journey, understanding your customer's journey and if they're actually moving through is going to be the most important thing to track, however that means to you.
Yeah. Feedback from the market, I think, is very important that Lee mentioned. Like, I always worry when we put out a lot of stuff and we get nothing in return. Like, that's when you know something's not working, right? And feedback from the market early feedback from the market is very, very important, especially at this level of like, personalization and only looking at like, I don't know, 100, 250, pick a number, right? We're not going after thousands of accounts. So if we can't get anything back from there with such personalized messages, then there's something not right. Yeah,
I would also say that's such a good point, Divash. I also want to add, like, account intelligence is valuable. Like, account intelligence should be a KPI that you track, especially for accounts that you figure out through your outreach that are not in the buy cycle. That's fine. Like, this is about future pipeline and current pipeline. So if you find an account that is not in the buy cycle, that's in a future decision perspective, right? Like, they're not going to make their choice now, but you could potentially get them later. Understanding how they buy, who buys, what's important to them is such a win. It's a huge win, like a major, major win. So being able to say, okay, sure, we have this amount of pipeline that we generated and that's great. And we have all these other things, but like, we also learned all of these things about these other accounts. That's a huge win and should be counted as a win on your ABM reporting.
No, absolutely. Because like at the end, if you want to sell into that account, you need to have that knowledge one way or another, and you're collecting it right now. So I think also what I liked, I think Divash mentioned this earlier, you're looking at the leading indicators, but you're also basically sharing the small wins and these leading indicators with the rest of the organization so that they don't get too antsy and that they know that something is happening, that you're getting stuff back from the market. But still, I wonder, because there's a lot that we discussed and there's a lot to do, and you had some dedicated resources, but I know just in reality, very often, you have a dedicated resource, but that doesn't mean that that person doesn't have other stuff to do. It's just a reality for a lot of people and a lot of teams. And I just wonder, like, if you have met something like that and how you deal with this, balancing these other tasks that people have and meetings and events you mentioned, et cetera, with the focus on the ABM program.
Yeah. I'll start here, Divash, and if I miss anything, please jump in, because this is definitely like the most important thing to address, especially for companies that are a little bit more lean and have less resources in the pilot form, because eventually, ideally, everything is aligned with this. But for us, we were lucky enough to have one really great dedicated BDR resource. And apart from that, like, sure, we did have other people who were focused on the campaign, but they do have other jobs, like they're doing other things, myself included, have a lot of other elements going on. One thing that was really helpful for us is understanding that for our team, because we are actually quite lean, we're all leaders, we can make decisions effectively together about how to target, is that everything is kind of ABM for us. Everything should be, at least, meaning like the messaging that we're putting out for our target groups, we can actually repurpose that, make it a little bit more general, and use it for our general organizations that we're targeting. So we didn't actually I wanted the team, specifically the content team who I work very closely with, who are great and very, very helpful, to understand that like we can actually repurpose and use everything that we're doing for our general marketing strategy, for the other things that we're doing, and events. Like we can essentially, everything can be concise and collaborated and well aligned to the messaging that we're using right now for this problem cluster. We can do it. We can pivot in a month to a different problem cluster, but right now everything that we do can be related to this. And the more we are able to align on the messaging and use it in different areas, the better we'll do with this group of target accounts. So surprisingly, almost everything that we did on the marketing side was related to this. The events that we ran, great. Okay, of course, they're not always going to be a perfect fit. Sometimes we had to take people out of the field. Like I was gone for a couple of weeks at events, which was great. But the accounts that were there were the accounts that we were speaking to. So it was all actually very aligned. So I would encourage people to bring in leaders and actually, before you make your group of target accounts, understand like what else is going on in the business so that you can effectively create something that makes the most sense. So again, it's not a singular motion for us. It was a way of like approaching business for a couple months. And so because of that, it was a lot easier to do other things at the same time because it didn't really feel like we were doing other things. Divash, is that a good summary?
Yeah, that's a great summary. The only thing is that the only other thing I would add is that with the content team, we made a pretty clear expectation that if there's always any conflict between doing ABM things versus other things, you do ABM first and then you prioritize, you finish that first and then do others later. But again, for us, as Lee mentioned, it's not very different. Like our whole team is kind of focused on this. Doesn't mean we don't do other things, but yeah, but this is a priority. So.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. And I would love to also quickly chat about your stack and pick up one more question because Lee, you already touched this about ABM pipeline review meetings and also the person who tracks different buying and intent signals, right? Because why I would love to discuss this, there was a question from, let me check, there was a question from somebody in our community, from Kiran, how do you work on dynamic lists, right? Because one of the most common mistakes in ABM is that you develop static lists, tier 1, and then we proceed with tier 1 for 1 year, tier 2, then we proceed with tier 2 for like another 6 months, etc. Right? So what's your stack? Who is in charge of that stack? How do you use it, right? And how do you work on dynamic lists?
Yes. Okay. So I'll break this down. I think stack's extremely important because this is what enables your program. And I will say our pilot program was a little bit more manual than what we're going to bring to life next time as we kind of bring it forward, because we did a lot of things manually the first time just so we understood it very well. And we're actually going to be bringing everything for a full stack integration essentially, because I think that's the only really way to do this from a scalability perspective over and over and over again. But from a stack, we've got HubSpot as our CRM, which is great. It integrates with Demandbase, which is our intent signal and engagement platform, which I don't know what we would do without. It essentially gives us all the information with regards to what accounts are the most engaged, who are showing intent signals. We can use keywords. We can use, we can upload links. Like there's a lot of ways for us to support that. And it does integrate with HubSpot, which is awesome. And that's essentially what was our guiding force. We also use LinkedIn and LinkedIn Sales Navigator from a sales perspective. Lists are very, very helpful there. You can really understand engagement and reach out effectively by using these tools together. And then finally, ZoomInfo is just a way to make sure you have the correct information. So I would say that those are probably the 4 key elements of our program. In terms of lists, our lists live live in Demandbase. So we do have at the beginning of every program like a scoring and qualification system with RevOps where we like pull in and we select accounts based on things that don't change typically. So like, you know, those really core elements of the business that are really important to score. We also do an initial evaluation of like evidence of need. So that's very preliminary. So we do all of that research in the beginning. Now in our pilot, we revisited this every week. So we always went back and looked at it. We always went back and every target account, which is time consuming, I'll tell you, we made sure that we were on the right track. which is so important. I think that there are ways to automate this in demand-based, which we're doing next time, meaning like you understand your target accounts, you understand the signals that are associated with the things you needed to learn, and you just build dashboards in demand-based that do it for you. So every week when you pull up in your weekly meeting, you can just pull it right up and understand where you're at. And if you have a good RevOps person like we do, which is great, or if you don't, you can become it by watching a couple YouTube videos. You can build dashboards that work really, really well for your campaign. So you know how to actively pursue the signals that you're seeing, and your BDR can open up demand-based and do what they need to do through clicking on HubSpot, through clicking on LinkedIn, easy peasy, it's all integrated. So for us, that was a really effective tool, is like the initial scoring, so you understand where to start. And then coming back and you're like, okay, now I can kind of run through and see if anything's changed. Like my signals, are they changing? And you should be checking that every week so that you know if what you're doing is working or if it's time to pivot.
I think that this is a great way to look at the week to week and how the lists are changing. So the dynamic is built into the whole process there. Now, if we are looking at these different deals that are accounts, and then eventually deals that are moving through the pipeline and changing from week to week, I just wonder, because there was a question, I wonder how you are actually, if you are attributing, how you're attributing, because this is a question that we get so often about attribution, and we have our own opinion about it. I'd really like to see your perspective, and maybe if your perspective has changed, because now you're doing this together, you're doing that as a one cross-functional team. So I wonder about attribution, whether you bother with that, who gets the credit, etc.
I can take that first. I've thought a lot about attribution, of course, and so I'll start with saying that all attribution is wrong. Like that's just it's not accurate. But also, it's better to have something than have nothing, right? And so it should be not sort of deterministic, as in like, HubSpot tells me this, so I have to do this. But it's also like you tell yourself a story of what you think possibly happened there, because there is obviously, I think most people are familiar with the dark funnel and all that stuff where you can't really track most of the stuff, and so it's just limited ability to track that, right? And so there are three sort of levels of I think attribution that depends on your size of the organization. One is the straightforward go to HubSpot or your market automation tool, and they tell you what the attribution is. It's the most sort of least accurate, but it still gives you some information, right? The second is this sort of self-attributed hybrid attribution model, pioneered by people like Chris Walker, where you ask people where you heard about, where did they hear about you from? And so you use that for your demand creation motion, and then you use HubSpot for your demand capture motion. And so you have two sets of data points. You have people telling you where they actually heard about you from, and then second, you actually know where they actually came from, the last touch, right? And so you can sort of piece together. If somebody says, I heard you on the internet, and they come from organic search, you're pretty sure they went to Google and type searched you, right? And all of that stuff. So I think that's where we're at, and we use that. But we take that, and then we actually add some more touch points, some more data points, which our awesome RevOps person does, and then we try to tell a story of what is happening. The ultimate, is obviously, running this MMM marketing mix models, right? So there's like softwares that can actually run regressions and tell you like, what was the impact of you launching X in the market? So that is obviously more expensive. For us at this stage, it's a bit overkill. But obviously, as you get bigger, I think that is the true sort of gold standard and the scientific method to do it. But we're in the hybrid attribution model right now. I think it's good enough for us. We have a very good idea of where things sort of come from, and we have a good narrative around it. But again, it's not perfect. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And one really interesting question that I got from folks, and I would love to wrap up our conversation with this question, is how to balance awareness and activation activities. How to make sure that you are not doing 80% of activation, right? Or even 99.9% of activation, which sales would prefer to do, right?
By activation, you mean just booking the meetings and all
trying
that stuff, right?
Trying to book a meeting or generate sales opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I can take a first stab at it. And I know, Leah, we discuss this all the time. So, I mean, you have to. So again, this goes back to, you know, short term and medium term, right? Long term is 10 years. I guess nobody cares about that. So let's talk about short term, which is today, this week, this quarter, and long term is next quarter, this year, right? That kind of time horizon. I think, you know, we have to balance that, and the only way to balance that is, you know, again, the caveat here is that if you're in a huge market and you're sort of the market leader and you have a great brand, I think you can do a lot more activation, right? Because you there's already sort of existing demand in the market. You know, the market is already big. You are a prominent player, so you have the privilege to do more activation and go out and sort of harvest the demand that's there, right? But if you are not that, and most companies, as far as I can tell, are not that, right? There are only so many prominent players. So for most companies, that's not the case, right? So you have to go out there and sort of, you know, create the demand, put your name out there, create awareness, and also, you know, position yourself as the sort of the quote unquote thought leader so that people trust to buy from you, right? That's super important, because, you know, if we don't focus on that, and you only focus on, let's say, performance marketing, right? As a marketer, you focus on just putting ads out there on social, paid search, all of that stuff. The performance of that decreases significantly, right? Because it's sort of the brand awareness, the broad brand awareness, the sort of reputation of the market that actually makes performance marketing more efficient, right? I used to always, when I started out, I used to think that, you know, I can make performance marketing, like, let's say, Google Ads, more efficient by just learning more of the platform stuff, optimizing it, getting the best keyword, getting the best bidding strategy. There's a lot there, but that's kind of like, a lot of people know how to do that. The thing that really drives that is the stuff you do outside of that, right? Which is your brand awareness, which is your demand creation, and all of that stuff. That is what really drives performance marketing. So, I mean, I would ignore sort of this, you know, brand awareness and demand creation at your own peril, because that is very, very, very important as a benchmark, at least 50%, I would say, minimum, to do this. Again, this is where buying is super important, because you are it's one of those things where you're saying, oh, I'm going to do a bunch of stuff. I can neither track it, nor can I tell you when it's going to pay off, right? Directly. And so it's a hard conversation to start with, but you have to keep pushing for that, and then again, when keep tracking all the data, and when you have some early wins, try to share with the team and try to keep generating buying.
And I would love to say one really important thing. I saw that almost everybody who joined us at the beginning stayed this 1 hour with us, listening to us live. And I know awesome. A lot of people already reached out to me asking for the recording because they were not able to attend the live session. So, which means that was valuable. Thank you so much, guys. And let us know, guys, who are listening to us live. Let us know, was it helpful? Did you learn something new? Provide us some feedback in the chat. And I would love to appreciate you guys for sharing your story, your case study, being transparent on things, on the challenges as well, because I mean, everybody, a lot of peers are dealing with the same challenges right now. You saw a lot of questions about getting buy-in, not only from stakeholders, but from sales as well, right? Metrics, stack, activities, etc. So to let know everybody, until the end of June, we also invited our other clients to talk about practical ABM programs. So you won't listen only to Fullfunnel guys, but you'll learn from your peers, right? From people who are doing this and seeing the real-time programs. So again, Lee and Divash, thank you so much, guys. Appreciate you coming and sharing your story.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you
So much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. And yeah, have a great rest of the week. Take care. Cheers.
Bye.